Okay, so this is video 7, Exploring Anxiety. So, when we looked at the categories of the psychological disorders, the old DSM 4 used to categorize anxiety in one big area. It was anxiety disorders, OCD, and trauma. Now, according to the new DSM 5, there's three separate categories we're going to explore. One, anxiety, one, obsessive compulsive, and the last one that I'm going to try and fit in, might have to squeeze into the next video, but post-traumatic stress disorder. So first off, let's talk about anxiety disorders. Anxiety disorders are psychological disorders characterized by distressing, persistent anxiety or maladaptive behaviors that reduce anxiety. So there are a bunch of different categories. You have separation anxiety, selective mutism, generalized anxiety disorder, panic, specific phobia disorder, social anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, and substance-induced anxiety. So these are the different categories that are under the major branch of anxiety. The ones in bold are the ones that we are going to review in class for your AP preparation. So overall, anxiety disorder is kind of what I talked about, is the worry, fear, intrusive thoughts, physical symptoms, and feelings of tension. Everybody in your life has experienced some level of anxiety. For example, a spider crawling on you or a tall ladder. However, how do you know when you have an anxiety disorder? Well, this is referring to, we talked about in class, deviance, distress, and dysfunction. You have to start to consider those. And is it really impacting your daily ability? So the first one is generalized anxiety disorder. Generalized anxiety disorder, often known as GAD, is a type of anxiety disorder that is characterized by persistent and pervasive feelings of anxiety without an external cause. So you're not attached to a particular item or idea. So you're not fearful of one thing. You're just overall fearful. 6% of the population has been diagnosed with GAD. It's tend to be more common in women than in men. And usually there's a lot of evidence around the early 20s is when individuals are getting diagnosed. Some of the symptoms you may have, again, you may feel on edge about many aspects of your life. You have an intense worry that can be controlled, that can't be controlled. May have general sense something bad is about to happen, even when there's no apparent danger. You may not remember when you felt relaxed or at ease, and then you need to have a presence of these three things in the DSM in order to get diagnosed: restlessness, difficulty concentrating, sleep issues, easy fatigue, and muscle tension that you may experience. Panic disorder is another anxiety disorder that is a disturbance marked by a sudden and severe anxiety attack that have no obvious connections with an event in a person's life. Usually you're free of an anxiety between your panic attacks. Steve Madden was a famous person who had been diagnosed with panic attack disorder. It's more common among women, and it's often it's diagnosed when it's reoccurring throughout the month, several time periods. Rapid heart rate, sweating, trembling, shortness of breath, hyperventilation, chills, hot flashes, nausea, abdominal cramping, dizziness, fainting, trouble swallowing, and a sense of impending death are some of the symptoms one may experience with panic disorder. And again, there's specific criteria you need to follow in the DSM in order to get diagnosed with a panic attack disorder. The numbers and the timeline can be found there. Then you have phobias. Phobias are a type of anxiety that involves persistent and irrational fear associated with a specific object, activity, or situation. So generalized anxiety disorder is just fearful of all. Phobias usually are tied to a specific element of what you're afraid of. While many of us have fears or dislikes of a specific object or situation, they only become psychopathology or a disorder when they have caused substantial disruption in our life. So fear versus phobia. Okay, you may have a fear of spiders. However, if you stop going to work or school or can't sleep because of spiders, that's when they begin to classify it as a phobia. There's specific phobias that you can get diagnosed with. We're going to specifically look at agoraphobia, but there's also social phobia, which could be, there's a long list of different phobias, again, you can be specifically diagnosed with. Agoraphobia is the one your book talks about. Many people who suffer from panic disorder also have agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is an anxiety disorder that forms a condition which involves panic that develops when people find themselves in situations from which they can't easily escape. crowds, open spaces, etc. Agoraphobia is a fear of entering certain areas and kind of like you're not going to be able to leave. Maybe you're going to avoid crowds because of it. About 2% of the Americans are affected by agoraphobia, and more of them are women than men. The overall causes of anxiety disorders. So again, we just went over 4 of the different branches. Oftentimes, anxiety disorders are a result of environmental experience, so the social area, but there's also genetics indicates that families could also be connecting factor to anxiety disorders. And again, it talks a little bit about it in this image here. There is a known connection with genetics. Oftentimes, it's a combination of environmental, psychological, and developmental factors. The area of the brain that's connected with fear, remember, is the amygdala, and the hippocampus causes you to remember the fears, which is a good thing for you to know as well. Moving on to the next category is obsessive compulsive disorder. Again, this used to be under the broad area of anxiety disorders, but now it has its own specific category. So obsessive compulsive disorder is a condition characterized by patterns of persistent unwanted thoughts followed by a specific behavior. So there's specific obsessive compulsive there's a specific disorders that fall under this category. You could have obsessive compulsive disorder, hoarding disorder, trichotillomania disorder, and extortion disorder, which is often known as skin picking disorder. And then the last one is substance medicated induced OCD. We're going to spend time specifically looking at OCD. So the obsessive compulsive disorder has obsessions, which is a component of thoughts, images, or impulse that reoccur or are persistent despite a person's effort to suppress them. So you have this thought process, thoughts that keep going through your head, whether it's germs or dirt or something that terrible may happen. Then you need to do the compulsion. A compulsion is a component of repetitive purposeful acts performed according to certain private rules in response to the obsession. Whether it's you continuously wash your hands, you check your folders, you check your locks, you check your lights, you check your homework. And this becomes a problem when you can no longer function in society because you're caught up with these routines. So obsessive compulsive disorder is when they're calm people with obsessive compulsive disorder view their compulsions as senseless. However, when anxiety is arrived, they can't resist performing them over and over again. OCD, they say, usually runs in family, and there's a clear genetic connection between the two. They also talked about the cause of it is environmental. They say behavioral therapy is a great avenue that helps with OCD. So here's the cycle. You have your obsessions, which is the unwanted, distressing thoughts and urges. Then you have the anxiety, which is the fear. Then you have the compulsions, which is the behavior you need to perform in order to get the obsessions to go away. And then you have the release period. The last one is traumatic stressor-related disorders. This is the last category we're going to look here. And post-traumatic stress disorder is an anxiety disorder characterized by haunting memories, nightmares, social withdrawal, jumpy behaviors, insomnia as a result of a traumatic event. And there's several different types of disorders. I didn't list them there that fall under post-traumatic stress disorder or stress-induced disorders. This disorder specifically dates back to 6 BC, where there were reports on battlefield having adverse effects on soldiers. In the past, PTSD has been referred to as railway spine, shell shock, battle fatigue, traumatic war neurosis, or post-traumatic stress syndrome. Today involves a lot of different types of treatments. And again, there has been shell shock, it's been known as shell shock therapy has been used, and now there's a lot of new PTSD therapies out there. So a lot of the symptoms that can be found here, you need to have 4 or more of the following symptoms that constitute for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And in some cases, they are changing the name to PSD, post-stress disorder. Oftentimes, you could have haunting memories, nightmares, flashbacks, social withdrawal, jumpy anxiety, and sleeping patterns. And it could be due to abuse, witnessing interpersonal violence, motor vehicle accident, experiencing a natural disaster, etc. Kind of looking at some of the stats that we'll talk about, but there has been a rise in people getting diagnosed since 2003 with post-traumatic stress disorder after our invasion in Iraq and Afghanistan.